I sort of wait until the pig comes in and, let her talk to me in a way. Like looking at a menu and being like, okay, my 4 meat proteins are from not just the same type of animal, but the actual one animal. That was, yeah. So, there's dishes, but it had changed depending on the pig,
This is The Crackling. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Many in hospitality dream of the day they can open their own restaurant, to build it from the ground up and execute their vision of what it means to dine and imbibe on their terms. But what are the challenges of nailing this vision, this dream? For Nigel Ward, the last few years have been a journey of just that, and he's just putting the finishing touches on a venue that is every bit of him and his experiences. Nigel, how are you?
Oh, a bit nervous, actually, mate. Yeah, we've chatted at length twice now, and it's always in an empty restaurant. So I'm a bit worried I haven't got too many more stories left in the tank, but we'll see how we go.
Well, you've always got a story, so I'm sure you're going to be fine. But it's been quite a journey. This is almost sort of your dream restaurant, and the attention to detail you've been putting into it has been extraordinary. What's it been like?
Well, it's been a bit boring for the last few months because we've had a fully fitted dining room, but just sort of waiting on council approvals. But the process of building, we talked about last time on the weeds was, probably I underestimated the amount of work involved. But I'm actually here at the moment in the dining room upstairs, and I've just set it up for our first function, which is in the next couple of weeks. And I've got a big long table of 24 chairs and plates and glasses. And yeah, it's all looking pretty real, which has only really happened in the last sort of 2 days. So it's very exciting. But yeah, the whole process has been, it's been challenging, but I'm just really looking forward to seeing a room full of happy people.
Well, give us a sense of what the place looks like, what you've created.
So we've sort of modelled it on a Roman osteria. It's a heritage building. It's from 1890. Used to be an old hardware shop. And we've basically retained all of the original features. So the old fireplaces, pressed metal ceilings, and sort of built this space around, I guess, the beauty of the building. And it feels, even just being here now, it doesn't feel like a new restaurant, if that makes sense. It feels like this is what it should have looked like, and it feels very comfortable and lovely. I'm super stoked with how everything's come up. There's not a single little bit of detail that I'm not, really pleased with and proud of.
There's a lot of people in the industry that sort of dream of creating their own venue, not just owning their own venue, but building it from scratch is quite different and an incredible opportunity. Well, what sort of advice or learnings have you had from this experience?
I guess, number one is engage people that know what they're doing. We got Tim Leveson to do the interior, and it's stunning. And I thought his vision was kind of ambitious in the beginning, but definitely get the right trades, and probably make sure it was a restaurant beforehand. That's really the big lesson. Don't ever buy or rent a space that you want to turn into a restaurant that doesn't have pre-existing use rights, because the rules now are just, they're geared towards new buildings, and and trying to take a 19th century shopfront and turn it into a restaurant with wheelchair compliance and fire rating and all this kind of stuff is whilst trying to retain, I guess, the character of the building has been really hard. So yeah, just make sure you find the right people that give you the right advice. And I'm not saying that I haven't been given the right advice. I probably just was a little bit stubborn because I fell in love with the place, and I was like, nah, that's what we're doing. We're just going to do it. And finally we're sort of at the final hurdle. So it's very exciting.
The foundation and at the very heart of your cookery is Italian cuisine. Tell us about how you fell in love with Italian cookery and why it's a part of you.
This is embarrassing. I used to go to this cafe in Chatswood in Sydney. Like instead of going to school, I used to dodge school and go to this cafe and smoke cigarettes and drink coffees with all the old boys. And they were all old Italians and Greeks, and I was sort of a young kid with them, and I felt so cool. And I watched The Godfather, and there's this scene where Clemenza teaches Michael how to make a sauce for like a lot of guys, and that's the first thing I ever cooked. I made that sauce. I asked Mum to get me all the ingredients, and I made that sauce without a recipe when I was like 14, and that just kind of started from there.
What's been some of the real sort of learnings that you've had over the years that have influenced and the direction that you've taken with your sort of interpretation of Italian?
Okay, attention to detail. Just repeat until you get it right. I remember my first job was at Sean's, and Sean used to call me Chicken Boy as a joke because he used to get. His roast chook was so famous, but he used to get like 50 chooks in on a Wednesday, and I'd finish at TAFE and burn over by like 1 p.m. And my job was to sort of put butter under the breast and trust the chickens. And I used to time myself every week. And, I think I started at like, 3.5 hours. And then by the end of the year, I was at like 45 minutes. So, you just keep doing something repetitively until you until you get it right. I mean, I remember looking in the ovens at night time, like taking all the tuiles out one by one when they were perfect, or the rhubarb, making sure it didn't explode. That's pretty important. I guess don't be a cowboy is a pretty big one. I've tried it a lot in the past. I remember being in the shit at loot shows when I was a commie, and I went in the back corner of pastry and I pulsed the shallots for the salad dressing in the RoboCube, just with no one looking. And Logan took a salad leaf during service, and he just knew straight away. And so he ordered a 20-kilo bag of shallots the next day, and I had to peel and chop them all by hand. So I decided not to do that anymore. And the other thing that I'm really crazy for, and everyone thinks I'm a bit nuts, is that I literally empty and clean the cool room and the service fridges every day, and that's every single container. It needs to be downsized because it's just a really interesting way to like, I've got 3 portions of this, maybe we can turn that into a special, or you're like, I hate food waste. And Sean's and Lucho's and even Trullo in London were so good for that, in that if you've got a menu that changes every day, you can be flexible. You can put it on as a special. Or say you've got like 5 portions or something. You're like, we're going to be quiet for lunch tomorrow. Why don't we pop that on? And then that way, nothing's going in the bin. We're using every single bit of the product.
You mentioned Trillo and obviously Sean's and Lucio's. Is there any sort of learnings that you had in regards to pork and pork dishes during your times in those restaurants?
Oh, yeah, God. So Grant he's now at Feather and Bone, but when I was at Sean's, he was running front of house there. And we used to call him Waggies because, he was always experimenting with Wagyu Brazola and all that kind of stuff. But he used to have relationships with farmers back then and bring in like whole pigs, and, Sean would, braise the shoulder, and then, do a little chop as well with it, and just kind of use different cuts of the pig. And just the sauce. Oh man, it was so good. It was just like every other like French restaurant, all that kind of stuff that I'd sort of seen would always like mount the sauce with butter. Whereas what Sean would do is, if you had a split sauce with like pork fat and pan juices, he'd just throw a bit of vinegar in it and then reboil it, and it'd just emulsify. And it was light and gorgeous, and like that's pretty much what I still eat now during service, as my little sort of service dinner.
You spent a lot of time travelling through Italy. And take us on the journey that you've gone there and that sort of impact that it had on you.
Yeah, there's been a few. So I think first one was 2005, going around in a camper van with my stinky 21-year-old mates, and going to markets, and just that's sort of that's when I decided to become a chef. Was just going to the markets and seeing the food culture. It's like a religion, it's really hard not to sort of become intoxicated by it. And then I came back, and that's when sort of Sean's and Lucio started. And then 2009, I took a bit of a break and did a little food odyssey around Europe, but in particular around Italy. And then when I got back to Sydney, I remember that I was cooking. I went back to Lucio's after I'd been there for 2.5 years, and I came back and did another sort of year there. And Lucio's son Matteo came to me. He's like, Dad wants to put your staff meal in the cookbook, because he's like, he just said, you get it now. Like, before it was, let's put chorizo with the prawns in the pasta and complicated, and you just understand now that you just got to make the prawns sing and keep it really, really simple. But yeah, and I guess the big one was sort of that time in London at Trullo, because we were getting all this stuff flown in from Italy, and Tim and Jordan worked at the River Cafe, so we were pretty much doing their food, but with a little bit more freedom of expression. And then I did this sort of food odyssey where we started in Amalfi Coast, and we lived on like a lemon grove, and I remember filleting anchovies in seawater and having them tossed through fresh spaghetti for dinner. And then we shepherded goats in Tuscany, and I guess this was with Blake, my best mate, and who was the other sort of chef at Trullo. And then we finished it at Valle Unite, where we knocked over 4 pigs and made salami, made cotechino, made all these amazing products from scratch. They grew the fodder for the animals. It was just amazing. And that's, I guess, being at Trullo, because Tim had also worked at St John. That's probably where a lot of those, that sort of nose to tail ethos kind of came around. And then you go to Italy, and then you just see, like, the pig is such a noble animal, but it's really, it's valued by the impoverished, because it's really easy to grow in a small space, and you can use every bit but the oink. And it's such a sustainable product to use, because you can literally, there's just, what are you going to do with it? If there's not enough fat on the belly, then we're not going to make pancetta. Maybe we're going to slow braise that, or it was just looking at the way they approach it in terms of different sizes. And
take us back to that experience of the 4 pigs, and do you have any stories of what that was like, making all of the small goods afterwards? And
it was 2 cows and 4 pigs in one day, first day, on a really big hangover. The pigs were like about 300 to 400 kilos each, so big girls. And so we obviously it was pretty full on, but then looking at how they used, like, I remember there was what was his name, Emilio, one of the old boy. No one else could slit the throat except for Emilio, and then he'd catch all the blood, and that'd go into a blood sausage. And I remember breakfast. Emilio got a little camp stove out, and they'd sort of taken all the meat off the ribs, and there was just kind of like the spare ribs, and he wrapped them up in foil with a bit of garlic and oregano, and stuck it over a gas flame on this little camp stove for like 20 minutes. And then we all had bread that was baked that morning with glasses of light spritzy wine, like 9 o'clock. It was just breakfast of champions, as they say.
Tell us a bit about when you first started sort of cooking Italian food for your own. Sagra was such an important sort of venue in Sydney. How did that come about?
Look, a lot of it's driven by what I learned at Trullo and in Italy, in terms of like at Trullo we would ring this fish guy in Mersey Island at 8 in the morning, and he'd be on the boat telling us what was actually coming in right now. He's like, I got some Dorset crabs, or I've got blue mackerel, I've got some plaice or some lemon sole. What do you want? And it wouldn't turn up until like 6:30 in the evening. And we'd have checks on, and but the fish wasn't there. So then it was this mad scramble, half an hour into service to get the fish ready to then send it out. And Saga was kind of the same. I used to ring Eli at Martin's every morning and do the same thing. And even with pork and with veggies, it'd be the same deal. Like I'd ring Matt from Malanda Park every Monday and set up place an order for a Wednesday delivery. And I'd say, what size are they? So I could start thinking about how we're going to do it. Have you got any sucklers that you're knocking over, or have you got a big girl so I can make some pancetta or some guanciale? Or is it a medium-sized pig, which we can kind of, use throughout the week for different things, be it sausage or whatever. But yeah, saga is very much, I don't know. So, I mean, it was a punish to do that, obviously, and I'm about to do it all again. But it's exciting to do that. You're not coming into the same restaurant every day for 3 months cooking the same menu. It's like, well, what are we going to do now? And a great way of doing that is, well, let's go through the core in the night before. Let's see how many portions we've got of X, Y, Z, what we need to order, and just let's just make it an organic process where it's just the stuff that I want to cook, and you look at the ingredients and it just makes you happy.
You mentioned that it was pretty hard work sort of operating like that, but Sagra was, in that swell of a few restaurants that kind of bridged the gap between sort of casual dining and got these sort of acknowledgement from all the hat system and all the different sort of awards as well, and changed our perceptions of what it meant to eat out at that level. What was it like for you, that little period of time where that was sort of considered, in that realm?
Year one, yeah, we got a hat and we won the the Time Out Award for Best New Casual Restaurant. And that was the pinch me moment. I think the Time Out Awards. I was like, "You got to be kidding!" Like, I'm looking around, like Parsi was there and Jeremy Strode and all these guys. I'm like, I don't know if I'm meant to be here. But a funny story, actually. I remember, so Pat and Miffy came in just after we opened. Miffy was doing Time Out and Pat was the reviewer at Gourmet Traveller. And they came in, he came in, sorry, the day before I was away for a weekend for a friend's wedding. We'd been open like 4 weeks. And then we went away to the wedding. And then on that night, they came back in again when I wasn't there. The two of them. Got a phone call from Glenn saying, yeah, Pat and Miffy are sitting on table 8. I was like, awesome, great, okay. But that review for Gourmet Traveller came out on my birthday, 3 months after we opened on the 29th of December. I remember I was down with my wife, Steph, who's French, and her father in Giroa on like a quick break. And I'd go to the newsagent every day and be like, when's the Gourmet Traveller coming? And then I read the review and I was just like, oh my God. It was, I couldn't believe it. It was such an amazing review, and credit to all the guys that worked at the restaurant. But I rang the restaurant phone thinking, oh, well, I better check that the phone's working. And it was giving an engaged signal because there'd been a power outage. So I had to drive from Giroa back to Sydney just to flick the phone over and then and drive back down again. And from that week, I think the second week of January, the first day we were reopened, Terry Durack walked in from Good Food, and then it was just, you came in a bit later on, and then, oh God, it was just, that first year was crazy. Beautiful, and we had such a good team around it. I had such a good team around me. Guys that I worked with in the past at Sean's and overseas, and Steph, my wife, and Alessandra from Lucio's. It was just, it was like a little family. And I think without that sort of little family, it would have been very, very challenging. We had 38 chairs, and I think we were doing 100 plus on Saturday nights. Yeah, it was pretty full on.
You mentioned the pigs that you were getting from Malanda Park. Is there any sort of pork dishes over the years of Sagra that you can sort of tell us about that spoke of what you were doing there?
Well, I mean, I sort of wait until the pig comes in, and sort of let her talk to me in a way. So the proudest I am about Saga is that I could look at the menu and there might be like 4 items on the menu that are from the one animal. That was so cool. We'd sort of, maybe do like a little fried pig's head with the trotters and all that kind of stuff, as a snack. And if we had any porchetta that we didn't sell the night before, we'd slice it thin on the slicer and do like a porchetta tonato. And then with the trim, we'd make sausage farce and do like a pappardelle with pork sausage ragu and, maybe a slow roast shoulder with, baked bologna beans and salsa verde. And if we had any excess fat, we'd render that down and make pastry with it and stick it in dessert. So, but like looking at a menu and being like, okay, my 4 meat proteins are from not just the same type of animal, but the actual one animal. That was, yeah. So that, there's dishes, but it had changed depending on the pig.
There's been a lot of water under the bridge since your days with Sagra. How are you cooking these days? Is it different to then?
It's funny you should say that. I like working at Maryvale. Obviously, I had pretty unlimited budget and was encouraged to make things pretty and saleable. And not saying the food wasn't any good. I thought the food was delicious, but probably wasn't 100% of me. Um, and I've been sort of racking my brain the last 4 months, sitting in this empty restaurant, waiting for council to pull a finger out, um, and wondering what I'm going to do. Like, am I going to do what I did at William Street? Or am I going to do what I did at Cello? And you know, Trullo in London's been open for 13 years. Sagra turns 10 next year, and I've been out of there for 5 years. And I just think, brown's beautiful. It's got to be flavour first. I've got to go back to Cucina Povera and just do what I know, like veggies. I got some veggies delivered the other day because obviously they're really expensive at the moment. So I got cauliflower leaves and all the offcuts of veggies, not just of animals, to sort of start playing with in terms of and there's so many things that you can play around with that taste amazing, like they do in Italy, like the bitter greens, and obviously they go really well with pork too because it sort of cuts through the richness of the meat. But no, I'm going back to basics. So, and it may be repetitive. It may be, oh well, you were doing that 10 years ago at Saga, but you know what? The restaurant's still open, so it's got to stand for something, right? And it's the sort of food that makes me happy to cook. It's got to be homely, and it may not look the prettiest, but God, it tastes pretty good.
You've had success as a chef and a restaurateur. How different is it when you step into the role of owning the business as well as sort of in charge of the kitchen and the food coming out of it?
I'll tell you in a month. It's been a while, but I mean, look, I think what I didn't do at Saga, which is why I probably burnt out, was that I tried to control a little bit too much. And when you've got guys, like Michael from Sagra is going to give me a hand, and he worked with me 8 years ago, and Pele at who helped me open Sagra and was my apprentice in London, and Glenn taught me colds at Sean's back in the day, and he was my sous chef. You got to hand over the reins. It may not be 100% your food; it might be 95% because everyone's got their own palate, but you got to give everyone a bit of a chance. So yeah, I've got a good team, believe it or not, in the current climate, that are just about to come on board, and I think it's just wine. So even though that might not be my ideal wine, then if you're passionate about it, you can go out in there and sell it, and other people like it, then great. And same deal with the food. That I might do things slightly different, but yeah, I mean, in terms of a day, you got kids. It's a little bit different these days than it used to be. Can't just sort of sleep in anymore if you're a bit tired. Um, It'll just be making sure that I have that balance and that I don't. Like Saga, like I've said before, was down there at 7 a.m., call a fish guy, and then write the menu, and then write the prep list for the chefs that were coming in, change any of the veg orders where if I'd forgotten something, prep all day, go home, have a shower, put on a shirt, come back, do front of house, and then every morning get in there as well, mop the restaurant, sweep the restaurant, set the dining room, or I guess all in the idea of, okay, well, let's try and save as much as we can on wage costs. But I think, that comes at a tremendous personal cost, which is that I sold my first restaurant 3.5 years after opening it. I don't really want to do that here. I want to put faith in the staff that I have, and I want to see my wife and kid sitting on table one in front of the kitchen because they're happy to be there, and we can spend time together, and I can take a night off. So yeah, we'll see.
You mentioned, when you were getting pigs in at Sagra, that you also made small goods. Is that something that will feature here? And what makes a great small good?
Look, we'll do some. Okay, there's some that I'm confident to do. that I think I can do just as good a job of as other people. But, that might be like guanciale or a pancetta or, even a bresaola to a degree. But, for the fermented salamis and stuff, there's just guys out there that do it heaps better than me. So the Europeans do that really well. It's like, you got a horse butcher or a pig butcher or what, you know what I mean? Like, so there comes a point where you sort of like if we start making bread here and I don't think it's up to scratch, I'm going to be like, well, do you know what? There's a guy down the road that makes amazing bread. So why don't we support a local business and just focus on what we know how to do really well, which is, pasta and, the like. But yes, small goods, we'll keep it pretty limited. But I guess, in saying that, I've said guanciale, pancetta, we'll make our own sausage, but it'll probably be more around hot dishes than sort of, aging stuff.
Quality producers is sort of key to sort of what you do. Do you have any stories of connections with pig farmers over the years?
Matt and Sue at Malanda Park are amazing. They're like family. I reached out to them when I was coming back from London before opening Sagra, because I was just trying to, like, at that stage, there wasn't a heap of small-scale farmers, be it veg or pork or whatever. You had to go through a wholesaler, and I was like, no, I want to get to know the grower. So, and they made everything so transparent, to the point that I think the day after I got home, I went out there and had a look at the farm and picked up a suckling pig for my mate's birthday, for my mate's 30th, and drove it home in the boot of my 85 Corolla. But I just knew straight away when I was there, I was like, these are the people I want to deal with, like not just in terms of how they raise the animals, but, they deliver them themselves. And I remember at Sagra, like we'd have to go and help Sue unload the sows that were a bit too big. And, you imagine you're walking down Stanley Street and you see a team of 4 chefs running out to a truck and coming back with pigs hanging over their shoulders. That's the sort of restaurant I probably want to go and eat at, right? Yeah, so they've always been amazing, and we were using them through Maryvale as well. And they'll be one of the first phone calls that I make in the next few weeks.
Well, finally, after a couple of years of hard work, you're going to be opening the doors of the restaurant. How are you going to feel when you finally swing the doors open on your dream restaurant?
Well, I said last time, I think we're going to go down. But I guess doing the functions in the beginning, maybe just until we get that final bit of paper, is a nice little way just to work out all the little niggly things that I haven't thought of, and I'm sure there'll be plenty. But it's been such a journey, this thing. And my wife says I'm a bit of a pussy, so I'm probably going to have a little cry in the corner at some point, I'm sure. She says it in a nice way, but yeah, I'm definitely the emotional one in the relationship. But if we can take that emotion and stick it on the plate and stick it in the glass, it's going to be it's exciting. I'm just so sick of people saying, when are you going to open? That's why I'm upstairs now, because if I sit downstairs in the dining room working on the computer or something, people are always opening the door saying, when are you going to open? So I'm like, I'm sort of hiding up here in the back cave. But no, it's so exciting, and yeah, a little bit daunting, but yeah, at least with the food, it may not be extremely evolutionary what I'm doing, but I guess it's a proven formula, and it'll make me happy for a long time, and hopefully a lot of other people too.
Well, as ever, Nigel, it's amazing to catch up with you again. I've loved having you on the Crackling today to hear your story. Good luck with the opening, and look forward to catching up again soon.
Amazing, mate. Thanks a lot.
This is The Crackling, a Deep in the Weeds production in partnership with PorkStar. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we catch up with some of Australia's best chefs and pork producers to discover what makes Australian pork so special.